Welcome to episode 32 of Wrinkled Wisdom. Today we sit down with Michele. She was a longtime therapist. She worked with many different demographics. And we were really excited to sit down with her because we've been wanting to deep dive into therapy and mental health since we started this project. You're going to want to stick around to the end of this episode because we dive into some heavy topics in the mental health realm. We appreciate you guys checking out our content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that bell so you get notified. Thanks for watching. Well, I appreciate you coming over and being willing to do this.
Sure.
We've been really interested to sit down with somebody that was involved in mental health and therapy for a while.
Sure.
I was wondering if we could go and look back on where you started and how your childhood was for you.
My childhood was chaotic, scary. I was born in 1952 to a single mom, and in those days there were not single moms.
Yeah.
My mother was a very intelligent, very pretty woman who had lived a very affluent life. Her dad was vice president of RCA Victor, and he was stationed in Havana, Cuba. And she spent a good deal of her childhood there and adolescence. And, she was sent off to Mills College after boarding school in Georgia, but nobody ever told her why she was going to college or what to do. And she had no sense of what she wanted. And except I think she was ahead of her time. I think she was a freer thinker than, I don't think she fit into boxes real easily.
Yeah.
But she, over the years, she experienced a lot of trauma and developed pretty severe post-traumatic stress disorder, certainly severe depression.
Yeah.
My mom was married and divorced 5 times, maybe more. I don't know. My mother didn't always tell me everything. It was not easy.
Yeah.
And when I was 5, well, first of all, I don't know if she and my father even ever married, or if the person I was told was my father. There was someone that gave me a name.
Right.
That I never really got to know very well.
Yeah. And did that make you, it wasn't very common for other children probably your age to be in a scenario like that?
No, I was definitely the odd kid out.
Yeah. Did you feel that way because you knew your scenario, or did people treat you that way?
Both.
Both.
I always felt different and kind of awkward.
Yeah.
And I was dyslexic also, which meant that until 3rd grade, I could not read.
Right.
And so I was also the dumb kid. I was the little girl whose mother was whatever.
Yeah.
And at that time in Fort Worth, married to a Jew, which was not a good thing.
Oh, really?
It was very anti-Semitic. In those days, he liked to play golf. He couldn't belong to a country club.
Oh, really?
Because he was Jewish. And his family had survived in Eastern Europe, the Holocaust. Right. And he was a good man, but he was a very traumatized, troubled man.
Oh,
my mother was traumatized and troubled.
Right.
And my mother became a pretty severe alcoholic. And so my childhood was challenging.
Yeah. What mechanisms did you have to get through it? Were you a happy kid, though, or was it?
No.
No.
I wasn't. I was a pretty depressed little girl. I remember my mother taking me to the doctor when I was maybe 5 or 6 and saying, she just lies on the couch and stares at the ceiling. I think she's depressed.
Yeah. At least she recognized that, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it seems like a lot of that generation, it was kind of just toughen up, get through it.
She recognized it, and she was sensitive, but she also was very secretive.
Yeah.
And you did not share your problems with other people.
Right. And you
So
were
it
aware
was-
of that. That at that young, you were very aware.
Yes.
That's hard on a child.
Yeah.
It's amazing how kids are so in tune. They're way more in tune than you think.
Yeah, I remember in 7th grade or something when she was going through one of her divorces, a teacher, and by that time I was a good student, and a teacher said, "Oh, you didn't do too well on that test or whatever." And I said, "Well, there's a lot going on right now."
Yeah.
And she was very angry with me for having told the teacher that she was divorcing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was the community supportive of you,
No.
like teachers and stuff, or was did they
I
take
was
kids-
always liked by my teachers
Yeah.
because I was a quiet, good kid.
Yeah, that's you're talking about going back to where you're saying you were dyslexic and they called you the dumb kid. Some of the smartest people I know are dyslexic.
Yeah.
We had somebody on here who was dyslexic, and he's Dave Reichert, who's he's very intelligent, and he's done a lot of great things.
Yeah,
And-
there's no correlation with intelligence, but when you're 9 years old and can't read, and you dread being called on in
right,
school,
and-
you know.
Yeah. Were kids supportive of it?
No.
Kids were, man, I wonder if things are a little bit different now. I talked to my daughter. She goes to a great school, and she has a great group of friends. But it seems like those kids are they have book buddies,
Mm-hmm.
And I just love that little mentorship program. She has to get her book buddy gifts for every holiday,
That's neat.
But it seems like kids, maybe I could be wrong because I'm not in school, but when I talk to the kids, because I ask them, I pry a little bit, it seems like the kids these days in school are a lot more supportive, at least at the elementary school level, than they used to be. I hope that's what's going on because,
I get that feeling.
yeah,
I mean, when I look at media, you see activities with children interacting with one another, and there's a kindness
yeah,
there.
yeah, I think so too. They have a lot to be happy about. Kids got it a lot. I wonder, back then, do you think kids picked on each other more because of boredom?
No.
Or what do you think it was that caused
Well,
kids?
I
Or
lived
what have
in-
you learned, I guess? I think we can get into that. You were a therapist, so.
I lived in Fort Worth, Texas in the 50s. It was an extremely conservative,
Yeah,
good Baptist.
right.
I remember walking home from school with one little girl, and she said, "It's a shame you're going to go to hell, Michele, because you're a nice person."
Oh,
And I said, "Why am I going to go to hell?"
right.
And she said, "Because your mother's divorced and she was married to a Jew. You're going to go to hell." And I remember thinking, well, shit, I haven't gotten to do anything yet. If I'm going to go to hell, I ought to do something
Yeah, you ought to
bad.
cause some trouble. Yeah, it's crazy to think, and kids get that from their parents. Like it is, my daughter was in a scenario kind of it's not similar, but it was an African American family, and the little girl came up to her and said something like, something about they were gonna have a picnic or something, and the little girl was like, "Well, or you're gonna," she's like, "Well, you're from," she'd heard about picnics back in the segregation days or before then, slavery days, where they would go and hang, and and the girl's like, your kind used to hang my kind. And right to, straight to her, my daughter was so upset, and it's just kids hear these things from their parents. And I think parents didn't do a good enough job. I think they're getting better, but we didn't do a good enough job of being open-minded, I think, to things. I think it's very, you think it's unique to the time, or do you think it's changed?
I think we're going backwards.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, if you turn on the television
Right.
and look at the state of the world right now,
Yeah.
I kind of feel like what I spent 30 years of my life trying to do
Yeah.
is of no value anymore. And I know that's not the case,
Right.
but when I hear the dialogue
Right.
of so-called leaders and such, all I hear is hate.
Yeah.
I hear hate and other isms.
Right.
And,
Do you think that so division has been created all of human history?
sure, we're tribal.
Tribalism,
Yeah.
right? Do you, I'm excited to ask you this question. Do you think that humans have an instinct of an enemy built into them that they have to fulfill?
Who knows? Genetically, probably so, because how did we evolve and survive? But this is different. This isn't, I see you coming towards me, and you're a big guy, and it's a dark night, and, you're a potential threat.
Right.
It's, I know you're not a threat, but I'm going to say you are.
Right.
And I'm going to say you're an animal, too, while I'm at it.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
this, that, and the other thing. That's a whole, there's a malignity with which we're interacting with one another these days. That really concerns me.
Yeah.
It really saddens me.
Yeah, I know.
Seems like cruelty is the point.
I think, go ahead, Wayne.
It almost seems like they've recognized that primal instinct to, identify somebody as the other and weaponized it against us a little bit, just because they know it's a thing.
Right.
And that's, to me, why I think it's different, because I feel like I'm supposed to now. Like, I feel like they really would like it if I didn't like X, Y, Z.
Right.
And that's what makes me feel kind of icky. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too bad because I know what you're talking about. I've been very fortunate where I've traveled all over the country. I've been to every state but Hawaii. I've sat down with tons of people, all kinds. And I lived in Florida for a while as a kid back in the end of the 90s.
Me too.
Yeah.
Not in the 90s.
Right. Well, and it was, I witnessed real racism.
Yeah.
We had 2 adopted black cousins, and there was people that would walk on the other side of the street if we were walking down.
And when I was growing up in Texas, I mean, there were still the white-only drinking fountains.
Right.
I remember going into, ironically, a Mexican restaurant, but it had a sign out front, "No dogs, no Mexicans."
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a very vivid part of my childhood. And in 1968, when King was assassinated, my mother was working in a women's dress shop. And there was some conversation after King's assassination that this section of Fort Worth that was a black community called Como, that there was going to be some sort of I don't know if it was even a demonstration, maybe a vigil because of his death. And the women that worked at the shop where my mother did were going on and on about how horrible this was. And my mother made the radical statement, well, we don't know what it's like to be, and the term wasn't black then, it was a Negro.
Yeah.
We don't know what it's like to be a Negro, do we?
Yeah.
She was fired.
Yeah.
At
least she spoke up to her mind.
But she was fired.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather be fired on my values than have to walk in a fake
It's a
persona.
good theory, but if you don't have a home, you don't have money, you don't have... It was terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very proud of her when I think back at that. But I remember at the time, we wondered how we would eat, how we would pay our rent.
Right. Well, I think that's with a lot of people. Like, I can tell you from my personal experience and my actually being, like, my dad was gay, my real dad. And I think my relationship with my mom was probably a forced relationship to be accepted. And he never functioned as an adult. Like, he just couldn't psychologically function. I think there was more. I know that, I know that his mom was not necessarily, she was abusive. She was just, her persona was abusive. And in one way or another. And it caused him to where he never functioned. Like, he got into drugs. He had HIV and then ended up dying of leukemia and HIV. But I've always looked back on that and had a very weird thought about, like, man, if it was acceptable to be gay back then, I would have never lived. So I have this weird, like, thought, and
But back then's not that long ago. You're a young man.
Yeah, 87 I was born. Yeah, and it's But now, I work with people from all over the world, all different backgrounds. And you talk about it going the other way. I think it depends on your environment, because I see it opposite. Living in it in my generations compared to just even not that long ago when I was a kid to now, it's very acceptable.
And that, that's a good point. I'm 72. My husband is 77 or about to turn 77. He'll get mad at me if I have the wrong age. But I used to live on the west side of the state.
Yep.
And it felt very different there.
Yeah.
I moved to the east side when my late husband was dying, and our daughter lives in Tri-Cities, and he had lived with Parkinson's for 22 years. And we moved over and then I had heart failure and a pacemaker, and it just... I felt insecure and like we needed to be closer to our daughter.
Yeah.
And they were really close anyway. So that was a really beautiful year for them to have together.
Yeah, that is nice.
Yeah.
That's so important.
So I'm new to the Tri-Cities, and I never would have actually chosen to be here.
Right.
I don't like the weather. I don't like all sorts of things about it.
Yeah, it's a little bit more mild on the west side.
But it's my home now, and things have changed. And after my husband's death, I met Mike, and I have a good life here. Yeah,
good for you. I like to hear that. I like to hear people appreciate even through like after hard circumstances, appreciate what they got to or where they're at in life. Because you got to be appreciative. I think a lot of that has to do with, I want to get into, your schooling and that you're a therapist, but I really want to talk about that because I see a lot of the mental health epidemic and people that I've been around. I've been fortunate enough for a lot of people vent to me, which makes me, I feel proud of that. And they tell me a lot of things. And I can say almost like 99% of the time, there's in the conversation, could be just the mood at the time, but there's a very strong lack of appreciation for little things.
There's a complete lack of gratitude.
Yeah. And I was wondering.
We're a very spoiled nation.
Yeah.
And I get very tired of people whining and complaining about what victims they are.
Right. Yes. Yes, I agree.
I don't care for that.
Right. I agree.
It's like, open your eyes. We are so fortunate to have been born in this country.
The lotto of life.
The three of us in this room, we're white and we're American.
Yeah.
We hit the lottery.
Yeah. Okay. I'll be curious how you ask this question. So we can't control the past, do you think, although it's been a rough past and we're still in the middle of it, right? We're in the middle of the present, really, if you look at the chronological scale, let's say the last 100 years. Do you think that, I got to word this right, slavery was going on all over the world. It wasn't just in America, like people think. It's been going on for a very, very long time. Right. Paid labor was nothing. It's actually a very new idea. But do you think that America bringing people from other countries, because there was Chinese that worked in the gold mines and the Irish and a lot of other cultures, do you think that they review it as lucky now, or do you think they should, even though their ancestors went through a hard time? Because every ancestor really went through a hard time somewhere.
I don't know. I think if your family's background is that you were property.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think about that a lot. You get those
I mean,
it's
a good question.
Yeah.
Certainly things have changed but look at the backlash that's going on right now.
Right.
About, diversity.
Right.
Oh, it's a bad word all of a sudden.
Well, I think and here's where I'll go back to Martin Luther King. His whole speech was on merit. That's what it was, right? Or his whole idea and dream was based on merit, no matter who you were. And I feel that if that gets taken away, then it really takes it damages character, like, because
I agree, but the upper class whose kids are legacy admissions to Yale and Harvard,
right,
that's not based on anything other than mama and papa's money.
Right.
So, merit needs to go both ways.
I agree.
That's
why that actress she went to prison for that. What was her name? From Full House.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, in California,
Yeah.
Paying to get her kid into schools and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They held her accountable. I can tell you that I have, because my family was like pretty well known in the community I was in, I probably was respected a little bit more. But to my, not to my fault. It was just because my grandparents were awesome people, and they still are. They're still around. Very respected people. And I do remember that feeling of having like a little bit extra oomph in my step because I was their grandchild.
And that sounds like also just pride.
Yeah,
that's
could
a good thing.
I was fortunate. I was very fortunate.
And it's a good thing to know that you have something to be grateful for.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I want to go back to, you went to school. You ended up going after school. How was your young adulthood? Having a traumatic childhood, did it affect you into your young adulthood, or did you?
Yeah. I had to move away from home when I was 16 to get away from my stepfather, who was abusive.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I worked in a restaurant, and I rented an apartment above the restaurant.
At 16?
At 16.
Oh, wow.
I supported myself completely, and I'm proud of that, but I certainly wasn't prepared for that.
Right.
To suddenly be 16 and you're paying rent and you're, I had a phone and I paid my phone bill and I had a checking account and,
Were you proud of yourself at the time?
Yes, but again, I really knew that I didn't fit in with anybody.
Yeah.
Because I would go to high school during the day. And then on Friday, when I would come home from school, I would change into my uniform and go down. So I would go to my apartment, change my clothes, and go down and work that night, and then work all day Saturday and Sunday. And then Monday, I would go back to school.
Yeah.
And it was hard, and it was stressful. There were younger men that were older than me, but that really saw me as a great little target.
Right.
I didn't fit in with other kids in high school. They thought, why does she have her own apartment? Looking back, I'm really surprised that social services didn't get involved.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad they didn't. That would have been one more trauma. I think it was better that I set my own course.
Right.
But so I did that.
When you look back on it, do you ever reflect on your, we'll say, God-given traits that got you to that point? Like, have you ever thought back and been like, man, I'm really proud that I was given these personality traits that allowed me to, because a lot of people would just stay and go
when
through
I was in my late 30s, early 40s, I was the CEO of a children's inpatient treatment facility. And I remember, and these were there were 4 facilities in the state of Washington that had a contract with the state. And these were the most damaged kids in the state.
Yeah.
At least that came to light. They almost all had abuse histories. They had significant mental illness, most of it based on trauma.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking I could easily have been one of these children.
Right.
Based on, a lot of what I experienced growing up. But yeah, there was something in me, but there was also something that my mother gave me.
Yeah.
My mother was a very compassionate person.
Oh.
Half the time we didn't know where our next meal was coming from, but
dogs. Sorry. Okay. Going back, you remember where we left off?
No.
You were telling us your mom was a very compassionate person.
Oh, yeah. When I think of my mother, I always think of the phrase, "There, but for the grace of God, go I."
Yeah.
I remember her saying that more than once.
Oh. It's unique that your mom, well, not unique, I should say. It must have took a lot of strength for her to be like that.
It destroyed her, and it ultimately destroyed our relationship.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of regret about that.
Yeah.
And a lot of ambivalence about therapy itself, because during her last years, I was melting down. I was under a tremendous amount of pressure. The job I had as the CEO of the Children's Psychiatric Clinic, that was an intense 24/7 job. And then my mother was falling apart. And she clearly, looking back, had dementia at the end.
Oh.
And I did not really get it. And I was seeing a therapist, and the therapist said, "You're not going to both make it out of this relationship alive.
Yeah.
And I'm rooting for you," and really encouraged me to sever ties with her, which I did.
Yeah.
And I regret that immensely.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm sure you were doing the best you could at the time.
I did the best I could at the time. That's right. But, it's one thing to be 40 and...
Hey, 40's still pretty young.
Yeah, I know. That's my point. It's one thing to be 40 and, selfishly think, well, I shouldn't have to put up with this.
Right.
I should not have to put up with this. But I think back, it would have been a time if I could have shown her the compassion that no one ever really showed her.
Yeah.
And cared for her.
Yeah.
I would feel a lot better about myself.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to think about, because a lot of kids, and maybe you could answer this for me, you'd have much more experience visiting with this, but a lot of people that I've visited with that struggle with, I'll say, mental health or regret in a way, they were ones that had to take care of their parents. Mm-hmm. And it's like they had to grow up too fast, and they always felt that, because the idea is that your parents should raise you, and although all of us are just winging it, but still there's things that you need to be shown, and you shouldn't have to take care of your
parents. My
parents.
mom had no idea how to parent.
Yeah.
And I really didn't either when my daughter was born. I was fortunate in that my late husband, Preston, was a wonderful dad.
I love that name.
And he was a wonderful man. He was a wonderful dad. He put up with a lot of shit from me over the years.
Yeah.
He was the grown adult in the relationship.
Oh.
And is missed.
Yeah. How do you know why he was that way?
He came from a very dysfunctional family too.
Yeah.
Although he had two parents that were together until he was about 18 when they divorced. Okay. But his father had been impacted by the Second World War. He was an alcoholic. Yeah. He was abusive to his mother.
That's so common.
He would there's a story of Preston going and hiding in closets when his parents would fight. He was the middle child, and he was the peacemaker. He was also the only boy with very beautiful, talented, neurotic sisters on either side. And he was Mr. Smooth. He was Mr. Cool. I always say now that Preston was like smooth jazz.
Oh, I like that.
He was elegant. He was gentle. He was soft. And my husband now, Mike, is like a marching band.
Yeah.
And they're both great.
Yeah.
They really are. But it is, sometimes I go, what am I doing now?
Yeah. In your years with therapy, because we hear, this breaks my heart. We hear, what do you think, Wayne? Maybe 90% of the time when we sit down with people, their parents were alcoholics. Mm-hmm. Both sides.
Yeah. I think it's almost every time we sit down with somebody.
In my age group in particular.
And it breaks my heart to think. And in a lot of these, I'll say we hear more about the men. And as I've learned things through this, visiting with World War II vets and other things, alcohol was their coping mechanism during the war, and it came home with them.
And they didn't talk.
Yeah, and they didn't talk. And it wasn't just after World War II. It was after
Korea.
Yeah, all of them. World War I, World
Vietnam.
War II. Yeah, all of them. And it's really remarkable when you find the ones that made it out of those homes and situations the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
It's I guess what I was getting at was, in your years of therapy, did you do mainly children? Were you sitting down with children, or did you do adults as well?
I switched over the years. I started out and became a children's mental health specialist, and I worked with very high-risk children, children that were either we were trying to keep out of mental health institutes or were coming out of them, and we were trying to reintegrate them into the community. Most of them were in foster care also. Poor little kids.
I know.
Gone through a lot. And I did that the first 6 years after getting my master's degree. And then I went into private practice for a while, and that was primarily with adults.
Yeah.
And it bored me to tears. I was working with people like myself. I was working with the worried well. And I
like that, the worried well.
Yeah.
I've never heard that phrase before.
They were very functional people. They just were tweaking things and needed some support. And I guess I was enough of an adrenaline junkie that I actually liked working with more severe patients, clients.
Did you like the challenge, or was it that you knew that
I liked working with people, and later I worked in community mental health with adults, and then I became a geriatric specialist also after my mother's death. I wish I'd done it before.
Yeah.
But I liked community mental health because those were folks that did not have money. They were on Medicaid. And it was important to me to know that they were getting good care, even though they couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And I guess I thought enough of myself to think I could give them that care.
I like that. I like that you did, because you have to have a sense of confidence and belief in yourself to be able to really take somebody else's life into your own hands and try and help them. And it's not necessarily like it's not like you're cocky or anything like that. It's a sense of, I believe, because your intent is good, right?
Well, I didn't in any way see myself as taking their lives into my hands, because that's kind of scary to me.
I guess I meant helping them. Yeah.
But
maybe I worded that wrong.
Yeah, you belong to me. I saw my role as bearing witness.
Yeah.
And validating, and just some very practical, just case management sorts of things. Like, you need a place to live. Let's find you a place to live.
Right.
But aside from that, like I said, the bearing witness part and helping people regain their sense of dignity.
Yeah. What would you do if somebody never had a sense of dignity? How hard was that?
I treat them in a dignified manner.
Yeah. You show them that.
I remember there was always, in community mental health, at least when I was in it, usually other therapists would dress very casually. Jeans, maybe a sweatshirt or a top or whatever. I always made a point of dressing like I would if I were in private practice.
Yeah.
I
like that.
A suit or a nice dress or whatever. And I got some feedback sometimes, well, that you're kind of alienating them, aren't you? They're more comfortable with me and my jeans. And I said, no, I want them to know that I think so highly of them that I'm going to get up this morning and I'm going to put on a nice outfit. I'm going to put on some makeup. I'm going to get my act together and come in here and treat them like they're important.
Good for you.
And
I love that.
That's just how I felt.
I was raised that way. My grandma, she would make us go change into clean clothes to go to the little diner in town because you were stepping into somebody else's business.
Yeah.
And they worked hard to run that business. And if you're sitting in somebody's business, you represent that business at that time. I like that a lot.
And also just modeling, for other, like in my case for women, but you know, that this is how you pull yourself together. And
Right. I like
you
that.
might even feel better if you wash your hair.
Yeah.
You know?
Did you, looking back on your years as a therapist, was most, I would say, issues or trauma that you dealt with, was most of it rooted in the individual's childhood?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's certainly some organicity and genetics, and, you know, when you're talking about someone with schizophrenia,
Right.
you know, that's a brain disorder.
Yeah.
And so is depression, and so is anxiety. I mean, we know that the neural pathways in the brain,
Right.
but we also know that the brain can get that way from trauma.
Right.
So,
Yeah, they seem to be, like, research now is showing it more and more. Like, now that we're able to analyze the brain a lot more, how much childhood trauma actually damages.
it damages the brain.
Physically damages the biology of it, which is,
Yeah.
which is, that's so sad to think about. How it's when you're looking back on, let's say you're dealing with somebody that had schizophrenia, how were you able to take the empathy out of it and think, I mean, I'm sure the empathy stayed there, but how were you able to, I guess, compartmentalize how you would?
Well, generally speaking, you don't do classic therapy with someone with schizophrenia. There is a real need for medication management and things like that. But again, treating someone with dignity, trying to create a safe place, although that can be really hard to do when I'm trying to create a space for you that feels safe and you hear voices telling you that whatever.
Yeah.
You know, I remember an elderly woman I used to work with, and part of her hallucinations were that buzzards were attacking her. That's really hard.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine to be trying to function and buzzards are attacking you?
Yeah, and it's their reality.
It was her reality.
Yeah, it's so
and
sad.
You know, so we're sitting talking. Buzzards are, you know, and she got to a place where she'd say, "Go away, you old buzzards," you know, and it gave her some sense of like agency, I guess. But, you know, I couldn't do anything really about that.
Yeah.
You know, I could teach her some coping mechanisms, maybe.
Yeah.
But
I've always had these.
And I didn't work with a lot of. We had a lot of working community mental health, as I chose to do. That was a large group of our clients, but they worked primarily with psychiatrists and nurse practitioners in terms of medication management.
Yeah.
And then we would have bachelor level case managers come in and help them with housing and getting to doctor's appointments and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So real, you know, trying to create a safety zone around them.
Right. Yeah, that's how a lot of people, you realize if you don't have security around you, even as a child or as an adult, if you don't have, you know, we talked about this before, financial stability, you know, physical stability like health and food and things like that. And then, you know, being able to have a community, I think your community around you has to be safe. It's really hard to have a mentally healthy, I guess, day to day, because you have to live in some sense of paranoia and stress that is really hard to navigate. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's, you know, we talk about this with like my daughter, she's very empathetic to the homeless. And I tell her, I was like, that person could have been one medical bill away. Mm-hmm. You know, it was one health thing, or one parent, one bad accident, something, it could have been just one thing, you know, so we always try and teach her that to understand that it can happen to anybody. Yeah. And so it's, I guess without your security, it's really hard to have mental health. Have you noticed
we all need a foundation to stand on.
Yeah.
And to build on. You know, try building a house without a foundation.
Right. Is that how
doesn't work?
Is that how the most therapy practices work, is to find the foundation and see where it's broken and then help build that first? Or
I don't know how most therapy is done.
Yeah.
The most rewarding part of my career was the last 8 or 10 years. I supervised internships for graduate students who were doing a year before they got their master's degree. And they had already gotten the theoretical and the technological or technique aspect of their training. So I viewed my working with them to introduce them to the world of community mental health, which is very different than being a private practitioner, totally different. And it's not for most people. And helping them be in tune with their own stuff and how it might get in the way of them being a therapist.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge piece, countertransference and those sorts of things. That's very real. And if you're my client and your stuff starts triggering me, I'm not going to you should run, not walk away from me.
Right.
But how do you know?
Well, because a lot of people that go into psychology or any sort of psychology field normally have something.
We have trauma backgrounds.
They have trauma backgrounds, and that's their interest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I could see where that can play a role.
You also, one thing I want to make sure I say, in case there's some aspiring therapist listening, is to be very careful about the work because it can damage you. The work that I did, I started before I had my master's in 87, coordinating a rape crisis program. I did that for 3 years. So every day it was stories of rape and incest and trauma and responding, going out with the police and that sort of thing. And then after I got my master's, I was working with these in treatment foster care with these very damaged little kiddos. And every day I would hear another story of a child being sexually abused. I'd take them to the hospital to get a rape kit done, And then the 3 years at the psychiatric facility. At the end of that period of time, I had to take almost a year not work. I was so damaged from it. Yeah. I was so bombarded and was experiencing severe depression. I was at times even suicidal.
Yeah.
I had to really reorder myself and fall apart and put myself back together.
Yeah, we're not made to experience that at that level.
No, we call it vicarious trauma.
Yeah.
And it's real. And so people going into the field need to be really good to themselves. Maybe it would have been a lot healthier based on my background for me to have been an activity director on a cruise ship.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might have been a better thing to do.
Right.
For me, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think we all need to give it thought.
Yeah, I appreciate you
telling
us that.
And if you do go into the field, you need to really make sure you have good support.
Yeah. Do you think that's do you think a lot of we'll say kids or individuals that go to therapy that suffered events like these, do you think there's a good enough community for them because one thing I've heard from people is that they feel alone. That's their biggest thing is they feel alone. And I think you talked about that when you were a kid.
Yeah.
You felt isolated, which is one of the most damaging things to mental health for many individuals.
Right.
Some people like to be alone, but most people don't. We're community based. Do you think that there's enough availability for communities for people to get access to other people that may have experienced the same traumas as them privately, or does that need to be more developed?
I think what you need is a community in which you can tell your truth.
Yeah.
And, I would not necessarily choose to I wouldn't necessarily recommend that children, having a support group is one thing, but you also have to be really careful about not putting damaged kids with damaged kids to multiply their damage.
Yeah.
You really have to, that has to be done very gently and very in a skilled manner.
Yeah.
Because we've all seen, when someone says, oh, Johnny just met Jack and he's a bad influence. A lot of times it's two damaged kids coming together, and they kind of multiply their power, their pathology.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you need to know that there are people that understand. You need to know that you're not alone. And how that's done, I'm not sure I've even figured that out.
Yeah. I don't know if we ever do. I think it's crazy because have you ever had conversations with people and sometimes like not very long into the conversation, you can tell that they're a supportive role. Mm-hmm. I know what you're talking about. I've had those. Those people come every once in a while in your life where you can feel that like this person I'm safe with. It's like this psychological thing that we have where we're able to sense that this person, you're okay, you're safe with them, to tell them your real
I would just say probably the best thing that could happen to a child would be to know another child who's a healthy, who they can see another path with, that can model for them, be understanding and empathic, but at the same time not have all the same.
Yeah.
I've seen kids bring each other down a lot.
I can, looking back, I know what you mean. I've seen it happen to friends and other people, and you can see it.
Misfits.
Yeah.
And excuse the word, but misfits, we find each other.
Yeah.
And we don't always help each other.
Yeah, that's how me and Wayne found each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worried about that with. So my daughter's mom's in prison for. Like 20 years was her sentence. And I went through this extreme paranoia with her for like the first year I had her full time, because I was so worried that it would damage her. And so I was paying, I was doing what you're saying is like, made sure I was paid attention to her friends, families. I made sure she was around these types of people. I also tried to make sure that I had to find where it came from. Like, why was her mom able to get away with this, and why did she feel empowered to do it? And I had to, when what I thought identified it, I feel I did. And I feel like it came from a family, it was family oriented, I would say. And so I had to make these bold decisions and to remove her and be very, like I said, paranoid. And I didn't go to concerts because I was afraid if I got, because people were shooting up concerts then. I was like, if something happened to me, she has no parent.
Right.
I wouldn't go on a trip. I wouldn't do anything risky. And I would pay attention to her, see how she was doing. And I went to a therapist. I'm not a big fan of therapy, but
I'm not either, surprisingly.
Yeah. I think I'm a fan because my therapy I was always able to get from somewhere else, and I feel very fortunate. I know that not everybody has that. Not everybody has the friends and the mentors I do, and I feel so blessed. But the therapist though, when I went to her, she told me like two things, and I just needed to get them confirmed. And she told me, your daughter's mom's just a cancer. She'll be a cancer for everybody around her. Always will. It'll never change. And she says she got it from somewhere else. And she told me those two things. And then she also told me basically to have FU mentality when you need it. And I needed to hear that because I'd always been a giver, to take people's weight. And so I was like, that's what I was thinking. And I went to my daughter. It wasn't very long after that. I had made sure that she was never going to go see her mom in prison, that she was never going to serve her mom's sentence with her. She was never going to be tied to that sentence, anything like that. And I told my daughter after school one day, I said, Hadley, this is your life, and I want to do everything I can to give you the best life possible, but you have to do it too. And you have to believe that that's what you want to do, because that's what my mission is, and that's what your mission should be. And I'm telling you, it was like, she was fine before, but it was like she went into overdrive. When I told her that, it was like she needed to hear that.
How old is she?
She's almost 11 now. She'll be 11 in a couple weeks, but she was 8 at this time. And I as I've gone through this and looked back and my empathy towards other kids, I realized, like, how many kids go through what she went through and they don't have the family I have, the friends I have. And so I always wonder what happens to those kids, I guess. And I think kind of what you say is misfits find misfits, or they don't. So they really have to be.
You suffer alone.
Yeah, or you suffer alone.
Yeah.
I think I wonder if it sucks that there's no answer. Like there's no permanent, there's no defined answer.
And that is the answer. There is no specific, there's no perfect answer. We're all so unique, and our life experiences, I could find a wonderful answer for myself, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not. But it wouldn't be yours.
Right.
And
I like that.
I'm cautious. I've grown very cautious about therapy. There were times in my life when it did not serve me well.
Yeah.
And, the people I worked with were skilled. They were, or supposedly so. Yeah. And they had my best interest at heart. But sometimes you can over-relate to someone.
Right.
Like the therapist who told me, don't deal with your mother. Yeah. Get away from her, They were trying to protect me. Yeah. But what if they'd said, okay, what are some ways you can interact with your mother that don't harm you?
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Can I tell you a little story real quick?
Sure.
Just because you're here and that hits on it. So my dad that I told you about, my real dad, biological father, I didn't see him for like 17 years. I saw him once in 25 years. I saw him when I was 17, and then I knew later on. I tried to talk to him when he was like 20. I was 22 or something like that. I'd been drinking. I was in Colorado doing a brew pub tour, and for some reason I thought of my dad. I was like, I'm gonna track him down. I was day drinking, and it's crazy how life works out. But anyways, this is when I found out he had AIDS and or HIV, and he was like, and he treated me like I was the adult. Mm-hmm. He was like, you didn't even know I almost died or whatever. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, whatever. I was upset about it. This is when I realized my dad was gay, and I just knew. Nobody ever told me. I figured it out. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of embarrassed by it at the time. I was just kind of like, because you picture, I don't know. It's not the American, what they say is the American family, right? Of course, he wasn't in my life anyway, and I think I felt bad. Deep down, I think I felt bad for him. But so I knew, since he was sick for so long, I knew for a very long time, someday I'm going to get the call. Someday I'm going to get the call, and I'm going to have to go say goodbye. And I waited, it was plenty of years later. And, but I would think about this on drives, like long drives, because I did them fairly often. And I'd be like, man, when's the call going to be? Mm-hmm. And from doing that thought process for so long, when I did get the call that he was getting to where he needed blood or bone marrow transplant or something like that, I was like, I'll do it. If I'm have to be the donor, because I'm his only kid, of course, and I didn't know that siblings were better bone marrow donors than kids. But I was like, I'll do it. Like, if that's what I need to do, he gave me life, I can help save his. And luckily, if it would have been siblings or better, but when I got the call that I would get the call every once a year. It'd be like, this could be it, because of how sick he was, right. If he got any kind of infection. And so I'd get prepared, and then it would go away. He'd be fine. Then he wanted to give me a car once, and I went, he dropped the car off at my aunt's, and he was going to come back the next day, and he didn't do it. And I showed up, and I was like, and so at this time I had gotten mature enough that I realized he probably is ashamed. I didn't take it personal. Mm-hmm. I was like, he's probably ashamed that it would be too hard for him. And so then it was like a year later, I get the call. I was out here golfing, and like, you better come. And because I had thought about that for so long that I had this and also I had my daughter full time at this. I had the strength to go, and after I hadn't seen him in 17 years, to say goodbye. And the way he died, they were able to give him a blood transfusion and blood pressure medication to keep him coherent, and then pain medication. Mm-hmm. And so, because I was his dying wish, it was to see me, and so I went and saw him in the hospital, and my aunt and my grandma were there, and he told me something like, he said, he asked about my kids and stuff, but he said something like, you were my only, what did he say? You were my only accomplishment in life. And like, you sit there and when your parent tells you that on their deathbed, and then you think about the life that they didn't live, that they could have lived, but they didn't. And that's what they lived their whole life. Cause he still kind of thought like, he still pictured life when I was like a baby. Mm-hmm. Like he'd always been stuck in that. And I can tell you, like, watching him stare death in the face, he never got treated for leukemia. He cause he pretty much, it wasn't a suicide, but he just was like, this is my time.
It was passive.
Yeah. And, he felt like I was his accomplishment, and he was proud of that. And let me tell you, so when you it makes you think about all these mental health struggles and what people go through. I watched him stare death in the face with humility, mm-hmm. and he was happy because he had a sense of accomplishment, even though it was me. And that it put I felt like it gave me a lot of weight.
Some pressure on you, but also what a gift.
That's what I thought. I loved it when
he
said that.
Someone's accomplishment.
Yes. Yeah. But, and it makes you have so much humility. And it also made me think about, as I go through conversations with so many other people that struggle, or maybe go through, maybe they're gay or of a different background than what's, everybody expects you to be or thinks you should be. It's like all that person needs is an accomplishment and to be proud of it. And they'll get, be happy. That's like, you have to have a sense of accomplishment, and it has to be validated by yourself. It can't be validated by others, or I don't think, this is my belief, but I don't think that's fulfilling. If you're trying to validate you want other people to validate you all the time. Mm-hmm. It has to be internal. And I watched that as he faded off. I watched it, and I was like, dude, that's life. That's our point, mm-hmm. is to make sure that you feel accomplished in the end. Mm-hmm. And I've always, I think that comes, I guess I tied it into mental health after I saw that, because I thought about that for so many years, how he struggled, but in the end he was happy. And so I hope that a lot of these people that, maybe struggle with mental health, find something that they can accomplish, that they can validate internally, because they'll find a sense of purpose. You have to have one. Yeah. Or we're just like blowing in the wind. I mean, we're all blowing in the wind.
Have you ever seen that T-shirt that says, to the person standing behind me in line?
Yeah.
There's something about, you have no idea what other people are going through.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember it.
It says you are worth it.
Yeah.
Wayne and I talked about this when Wayne was working at the coffee stand, and he, go ahead.
Oh, just 10 more minutes.
Okay.
But I used to manage a pretty busy franchise coffee shop where I went to college, and I saw thousands of people every day, just nonstop. That's where I learned that you could never, you always had to find something to like about somebody, because we really all are the same. Yeah. And otherwise you're gonna have a bad time with the customer service.
Yeah.
But you could always tell. And there was one time, we started seeing this person a little bit more frequently, like every day, sometimes twice a day. Come to find out that her father had passed away earlier in the week, and she had nobody really to talk to, so she would come get coffee and kind of hang out. Hopefully we'd ask her some questions, kind of get her talking, because she didn't.
She had nobody to talk to.
Yeah, we had no idea.
Yeah.
You don't realize you don't have to be, you can be a barista and still have that same effect.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, that's why I wanted to be a therapist. I think because I knew aloneness on a very intimate basis. And I wanted to somehow lessen that experience for other
Oh, I
people.
love
And
that.
it's not altruistic. I mean, I got something from it.
Right.
You know, you've probably heard about the category of highly sensitive people.
Yeah.
Well, I fit that to the T.
Yeah.
You know, you stub your toe and I hurt.
Yeah.
And it's not really always a great thing.
Yeah. I know.
I can't watch a Humane Society commercial
Yeah.
on television. I have to immediately go change it or mute it or something. I mean, I just can't tolerate seeing an animal in pain or another person. And so if to some degree I was able to lessen some pain for some people, that lessened my pain. It was very selfish, actually.
Yeah.
But hopefully mutually beneficial.
Right. I love that you said that. I got goosebumps when you said that. I'm that way. But I can tolerate it though. But I can feel it. And I've took my whole life managing it. Like, why? Like, I cry in almost every movie.
Yeah.
Whether it's good or bad part, I'll cry.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not ashamed to admit it. Like, dude, when I go to Disney World and they do the music at the castle, every time I cheer up. But there's a sense that I can feel. And you were talking about how, not knowing what other people's go through, not knowing what other people go through. I always think nobody knows what I've been through. There's things that people never know. And I don't care to tell people,
Right.
but I use that as I use that experience for me to give them the benefit of the doubt. Always, even if people are giving me a hard time, and I teach my daughter this, like, you know, maybe their dog died today. You know, maybe you don't know.
You don't know.
When that car hauls ass past you, even though it's dangerous at the time, I say, maybe they have an emergency at home. You know, always have that mindset that you don't know.
Don't assume that you know what the other person is thinking.
Yeah. I've had this conversation with people too about like, you know, I know friends of mine that would always be like, they get offended about everything. And I'd be like, and I just tell them, don't give somebody that power over you.
Yeah.
You don't deserve that. And that probably wasn't their intent, because 9 out of 10 times, most people's intent is not
Believe
to
it or
hurt.
not, this person did not wake up this morning thinking, I'm going to screw with you.
Yeah,
Maybe, but
exactly.
not usually.
Right. And normally there's something else. And if you have the confidence to ask people a few questions, normally you can figure it out pretty quick that something else was going on. When you learn conversation enough and structure it well enough to do it without being, too invasive, normally people will open up, and they needed it. Yeah. They needed to get something off their chest. Sometimes it's good stuff they want to get off their chest too. You know, sometimes they want to tell you about.
Want to share something wonderful.
I always love when people they always say something like, not to make it about me. And I always tell them, make it about you. Like, I love people, so make it about you. And I think there needs to be a little bit more of that, because people need to be proud of who they are and what they've done. And sometimes they just need to tell somebody. And I think that's important. What do you got? 5 minutes left?
Yeah. Ask a question.
Oh, yeah. I always ask a few questions at the end. If you could give the younger generations a piece of advice that would help them maybe navigate through life, or has helped you, what would it be?
Well, I remember an intern of mine once. It was my 40th, let's say, wedding anniversary. It was one of the big ones. And she said, what was the secret to such a long marriage? And I said, forgiveness. And that would be something I would share. That forgiveness is a gift for yourself.
Yeah.
And the other person.
Yeah. I like
and I
that.
certainly was the recipient of that.
Oh, that's sweet.
For many years.
Yeah, I think forgiveness, and it comes in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's just
doesn't mean we forget. It doesn't mean
right.
that we roll over, but we hold ourselves down with bitterness and
yeah, that doesn't do anybody any good. One time my grandpa, I tell this story all the time on here probably, but just since you're here, my grandpa lost their oldest son in an accident, and somebody gave him a tree. His best friend gave him a tree, and they planted it when his son died. And Grandpa and I were working in the yard, And he said, he looked at it one time. And my grandpa's a man of few words. He said, I can't believe Tommy's been gone that long. And I looked at it and I was like, I just said, probably when I was getting a little bit more confident, so I would say things to my grandpa. And I just said, not that my grandpa wouldn't let you say stuff to him, but more emotional things, And I just said, Grandpa, I'm really sorry that happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
And he just looked at me, he said, you have to believe there's a bigger plan. And I realized that's why my grandpa has always just been so amazing, is he lived with this kind of forgiveness in life. Like, he's never bitter. He just kind of had this sense of, I don't know, what do you call it, what the word is, but maybe faith in a sense, and it's, I think that's a good piece of advice, just because if you carry those demons or things like that, or bitterness or anything like that with you too long, it'll eventually weigh you down, because you'll just keep adding to it until you learn to cut the chain loose.
Yeah, there's a universe out there that, some people call it God, some people whatever, but that we don't understand. It's beyond knowing. And sometimes just I've gotten, the older I get, comfortable with not knowing.
Oh, I like that. I think the beauty of not knowing is kind of that you get.
Well, then anything's possible.
Yeah, then anything. Yeah, you get to create it yourself, or believe what you want to believe, and it's your human experience that's going to create whatever you believe it is or want it to be.
I used to always feel like especially having been the little kid who couldn't read, I used to always have to prove how smart I was and how intelligent.
Yeah.
And I'm, I don't know if I am or not. I think I am, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
There's much more that I don't know.
I always think there's no true scale to intelligence. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can take an IQ test and pass it.
Well, I know a lot of really well-educated idiots, and I may be one of them.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're great. I really appreciate the conversation.
Well, it's
something I'm so fascinated with. Probably because of my experience, and yours as well is probably why we connect on that.
Well, if you ever want to talk, you know how to reach me.
Yeah, I can tell you, I would love to do it again if we get the opportunity and you want to do it, because I could probably be a little bit more structured next time with some stuff that now I'll be thinking about it, because you talk about helping people, like you just hope that you helped one person, or you hope that you made it better for them, and like Wayne and I've talked about that we do think this will help people, and we've been told that it will, and so.
Well, it was positive. I was really dreading it, but I've enjoyed it.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I was almost getting ill at the thought of it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
But just one quick story. Right before my husband died, I was thinking, what am I doing? This isn't being recorded, right?
No, we can.
Or is it? It's okay. It's all right.
Oh, no, I got Mark. We're good.
No, I was just not happy living in Tri-Cities and thought everyone here was mean. I'd had some woman when I was at a nursery buying a plant, and I asked about the weather here because I wasn't used to gardening in such high temperatures. And the owner of the shop said, well, where are you from? And I said, Bellingham. And the woman next to me said, we don't want your people here, your kind here. And I was just overwhelmed with this sense of, this is a mean-spirited place. And here I am, and my husband's dying, and it's 24/7, and just feeling very bad. So I thought, where could I find some nice people? However you define nice. Yeah. And I thought, Quakers. Quakers are nice. They're pacifists. They're this, that. So I looked up if there were any Quaker meetings, and there were. And I went, and went for a while until I met Mike, and he led me astray, and I want to get back to them.
Yeah.
But I mentioned to my cousin who lives in Sonoma County in California, I said, I've been going to Quaker meetings, and he's an atheist, so I was cautious about mentioning it.
Yeah.
And he said, well, that's very interesting, Michele, that you would seek Quakers. Not most people would. And he said, do you know that our family goes back to the 1600s, Massachusetts?
Oh, wow.
As Quakers? He'd done family research, and it was just like, Well, there you go. There's the universe telling me I
Yeah.
am connected to something.
Yeah, that's neat.
So,
Well, I'm glad you were
Anyway.
able to find that. You know, it's too bad that lady was probably having a bad day.
she was mean.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. I really
Hey,
appreciate it.
It was fun.